For the interesting talk, and we're gonna move actually on to another presenter from Italy, so where we have Mayala Wilderness, and we're now going into more an anthropogenic view, and therefore I would like to ask Maria if she can show her screen with us and if she can unmute herself.
I'm here.
Yes, okay, we can hear you.
Let me share my screen. Okay, I think you are looking at my screen now.
Perfect. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So thank you. My name is Maria Benciolini. I am an anthropologist, and I've been working in environmental anthropology for some years now. I started in Mexico, where I used to live, working about environmental conflicts involving indigenous people. And now I'm back to Italy, and I'm working more in some conservation projects, mainly about large carnivores and human dimension. So when I started to think about this presentation, I looked for some definitions, official definitions, and I found the UCN definition, the Wilderness Act in the United States, and the documents of the Conference of Prague. I know that for maybe all of you, these are like known concepts, but I like to go through them rapidly. What is common in all definition is that wilderness need to have native habitats and species. That wilderness have to be large enough, and that need to be unmodified or slightly modified by human activity, and the fact that humans are visitors. They do not belong to these places. So summarizing, wilderness is untouched nature, which apparently is a neutral concept that don't have so much connotation, but both wilderness and nature have a history and a cultural history that I think it's important to keep in mind when we talk about wilderness and conservation and what we can do to protect wilderness. So wilderness can be taught as a concept born in the United States in the 19th century, mainly with the foundation of the Yellowstone National Park and the Yosemite National Park, and the foundation of the Sierra Club by John Muir. The first motto of the Sierra Club was actually save the wilderness. And all this idea of contemplation of pure nature was in contrast with all the progress and accelerating industrialization that United States and almost the entire world was living in that time. But sometimes we forget that there were already people there that have been in some occasions evicted from what now is national parks. Now there is more sensitivity about this topic, but at first the idea that there already were people living there was almost cancelled from collective memory. And as I said, wilderness is taught as untouched nature, but also nature as a cultural connotation and a history that we should know, at least in its more important moments. So the idea that nature was a world that was hierarchically ordered came mainly from the Enlightenment. And at the same time came the idea of the distinction between subjects that were conscious and have the ability to know and to study, and objects. And the idea that humans are both nature in their bodies, because they share a body with other beings, and cultural, because they have a mind which is specific to the human species. But for a long time, even anthropologists thought that the divide between nature and culture was like a universal concept. But in recent years, in the last maybe 20, 30 years, this divide has been discussed and criticized by a lot of anthropologists who realize that this divide is not common to all cultures and to all ways of thinkings. And one of the most important contributions to this discussion came from anthropologists working in Amazonia, because after a lot of studies and fieldwork, they realized that in many cultures from Amazonia, the divide is not between nature and culture. The divide is between bodies. So there's this shared idea in Amazonia that people, animal, and even some plants have the same kind of soul. So they all have certain type of sensitivity and thought. And what make really the difference is the body. And the body is what give these beings their point of view about nature, about other animals, etc. And for example, there are a lot of myths where people and animals in a mythical time could talk together and understand each other and collaborate, do things together. And then usually something happen in this myth, like a flood or some kind of disaster, and these different beings stop to have this sharing. And still now, for example, when children go to the forest, they are taught to watch to the footprints of the people who are with them, because if the footprint is a human foot, it's okay. But sometimes jaguars can take the form of the human, and the only way to know if they are jaguars or human is to look at the footprint and see if it's human or if the footprint of the jaguar. And another really nice myth is about the armadillo, because there's this history about the fact that all animals were preparing their clothes, because they were told that when the sun will rise, they will maintain the clothes they have at that moment. And the armadillo is waving his clothes, and suddenly the sun comes. So the armadillo get the loom and put it on his back, and that's why the armadillo now is like this. So I was thinking about how difficult could be when we are talking about people who have this kind of sharing with animals, about how protect these animals and about how to tell them that they are so different from us, from humans, that we need to take different measures in order to protect them. Now I'm going to more cultures that I know more, because they are in Central America, where I've been working for around 11 years. And another interesting example about how humans and animals can relate is the so-called Nahualismo, which is a very important concept in all Central America. And it's the main idea is that every human being is born with an animal double or companion. It's not really important what species is this other animal. The important thing is that both this person and the animal are born at the same time, and that their lives and their destinies are interconnected. So if something happens to me, it also happens to the animal in different ways, because obviously people live in villages and animals live in the forest. But there's this idea that humans and animals have this common destiny because they share something, because they are born at the same time. So also in this case, there is a kind of social link between humans and animals. And this idea that we are separated from nature, it's really difficult to understand for these people. And at the same time, this is a photo from Northwest Mexico. There's this idea that wilderness and civilization are not determined by your nature, if you are human or you are an animal, but by other things, mainly your participation to networks of sociality, exchange, rituals. So, for example, a human baby, a newborn, is less civilized than the deers. Deers are sacred animals for Northwestern Mexican cultures because in mythology, they are the animal who gives civilization to humans. The mythical deer show to humans how to dance. And dancing is one of the most important ritual activities for these people in order to guarantee, for example, all that natural rhythm go well. So there's this divide between wild and civilized is much more about how do you relate with the other, for example, in a respectful way and in respecting ritual, than if you are a human or not. And also about dance and about deers. Dance is one of the main activities for, especially for Huichol people who live in Northwest Mexico, in this small square that you can see in your screen. They say that they make the land and their territory dancing and doing an annual peregrination from the Pacific Ocean to the desert of Viricuta. And this annual peregrination, together with dance, it's the way they have to actually to maintain and to construct the land where they live. They say that if they stop dancing and if they stop their peregrination, there will be no more world. This is one of the cases I've been working on, because actually in the desert of Virikuta, you can see it at the right of this map. The Mexican government gives some licenses for mining. And actually, it was thanks to these Huichol people and their political organization that these licenses have now been stopped. So this is it. There's this strong idea that even the land where people live, it's not something that it's out there and that exists independently from humans, but that humans need to constantly do something in order to this land to exist. So even in this case, I'm thinking about how could we think about protecting wilderness when people who live there is thinking that without humans, this kind of place can't or couldn't exist. And just to not talk only about America, this paint is from Australia. This is another really known concept between anthropologists, is the Australian dream time, and is this idea that all the land in Australia exists thanks to the journey of ancestors and deities, and all these ancestors and deities walked through the land, and where something happened to them, even if they sit them to think or they fall because they were tired, these are the main events that produced the land, how people nowadays know and see it. So again, there's this idea that land and landscape are not out there already existing, but they exist because people or deities or even animals walked in this land, and that was what gave shape to the land. Now I'm back to what I'm doing now, and back to Europe. As I said, I've been working in some conservation projects, mainly about large carnivores. So the question is, do large carnivores belong to wilderness? And the first answer that came to our mind probably is yes. But also in this case, yes, I agree, but there are some things that we need to keep in mind when we are talking about large carnivores conservation. You all know about all the conflict and problems coming from this topic. And from my point of view, there are two groups of problems that are connected, but they are not the same. One is conflict with large carnivores, and the other one is conflict about large carnivores, but between humans. Now, in this occasion, I'd like to talk a little bit about the conflict with large carnivores. Basically, because sometimes when we try to make conservation of large carnivores. A lot of people tend to think that the problem with shepherds or farmers is mainly economic, but it's not. I mean, it's also economic, but there are a lot of cultural, sociological, even psychological aspects that are really important and that play a strong role in this conflict. So some work have already been done by anthropologists and naturalists about these topics. And I really like this phrase from an article I read recently. And it said, the bear is one of the polite animals that take just one sheep at a time, and in general, he chooses the strongest sheep. It happens that several sheep die when a bear comes into the sheep enclosure, but it is only because they are afraid and they begin to suffocate. But the bear just takes one sheep and goes away. I really like this citation because it summarized a lot of ideas about bears that are shared in different. This study was with in Macedonia with shepherds and hunters. But this idea, for example, that the bear is a polite animal is widespread in different parts of Europe. Even shepherds here in Italy say something similar. This summer, I was with a shepherd in the Alps, near Bergamo, in the Orobie. And I was talking with the shepherds about bears, wolves, and he told me a really interesting thing. He told me bears are more like us than wolves because they can stand, they choose what they want to eat. So there is this sort of identification between humans and bears, which never happened with wolves. This is the same article. It was an article about bears, lynx, and wolves. And this interview summarized a lot of things that people think about wolves, mainly that they are harmful, that they are intentionally bad, that they choose to be particularly aggressive, that they choose to kill a lot of sheep. So there's this idea that wolves are intrinsically bad and that humans have nothing to share with them. While bears, you can give a sheep to a bear because in some way they are more like us. So what I think it's important to keep in mind is that, as I said, the problem is not mainly economical, but that there is a cultural background, there's personal experience, and all these interact with the actual conflict that people can have with large carnivores. So we can't forget that there's a long history and a long relationship between species, and all this history came to matter when we are talking about conflict, about human dimension, about compensation, and so on. And this is another interesting example about how perception and cultural position are important. In this study about Macedonia, people were asked if they thought that bear, wolf, and lynx were dangerous for people. And people responded that 23% of respondents say that bears were dangerous. 98% of respondents say that wolves are dangerous for people. And 33% say that lynx are dangerous for people. And this is really interesting because actually bears are a lot more dangerous for people than wolves. But as I said, bears are considered more like humans, more polite animals. So it's really difficult to understand for people that wolves, that are considered the main enemy of shepherds, are less dangerous than bears when it comes to people's safety. And I think that it's really important to have in mind these kind of problems when we try to protect, for example, wolves, because it's not enough to give data about wolves or about bears, but we need to open a discussion with people also about what they think, about what they feel, because otherwise it's really difficult to have a real interest and a real commitment from people to protect these species. So why these species are so important and why they claim so much attention, beside the economical problems and the safety problems? One of the reasons is that they somehow put in discussion our divide between nature and culture, because they frequently broke these boundary. They came near the houses. They sometimes there are here in Italy. There were some cases of wolves attacking and eating dogs. So there's this wild animal eating the family animal. And it's like, I mean, if wilderness is the place where humans are host and they don't belong to that place, there's the reciprocal idea that some animals shouldn't stay where humans are. So it's one of the problems, I think, is how to explain people that animals don't know this divide between nature and culture and civilization and wilderness and tamed places and wild places. So these animals, I think that they defy a lot of our assumption, personally and also publicly and culturally. And even across Europe, we have different kinds of reaction and different kind of thinking about this. An interesting example is N13. N13 was a bear.
Maria?
Yes?
Maria, I'm gonna quickly interrupt here.
Yeah.
Your time for the presentation is coming to an end.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt your presentation. There was one question, perhaps in 1 minute, which you could still answer. The question was, what do you think of modern and widespread stories such as Disney films like The Jungle Book? How did they change our perception on these animals?
Okay, I'm reading the question. Okay. I think that our relation with iconic animals like bears and like wolves came from a really long time ago. And I don't know if the Jungle Book have such an influence about this, but surely, I mean, no, they don't have so much influence, but they have some kind of influence when, for example, bears are showed as really tender and really nice and really friendly animals. But I think that this kind of I think that our relationship with animals in general and with iconic animals is a really, it's a longer relation, and it has really strong roots. And these new Disney films and etc. Are grounded on this already existing relationship.